you're
Absolutely.
doing business with buying a product or whatever, and you're putting stuff online, you want to have that assurance that that company, regardless of its size, is protecting your data in a way that it's not going to be stolen or used in an inappropriate manner.
I'm Eric Lipsey, and this is Galt University. Today, I'm here with Nick Malaconi, Director of Business Intelligence and Data Governance. How are you today, Nick?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Today, I'm hearing so much about data security, analytics, and things like that. I've even followed a stock called Datadog, and and I've just seen it rise over and over again, year after year. It seems that data is becoming so crucial and so important these days, but sometimes we don't quite understand why. So I'm hoping today that you could shed some light on that, on the importance of the data governance and how it applies to many business owners, even small business owners. And we may not have that understanding. So maybe we could start by talking about data analytics and why it is important for a business.
Yeah, Eric, actually, I think data, obviously it has always been important. It's the fact that companies are starting to realize that data is a strategic asset. That's why there's such a, I think, explosion of conversation and products, generative AI, all of this around data, because companies are realizing how important it is for an entity to not only survive, but to compete and to innovate and to stay relative within the market, in their respective markets. The aspect of that realization has taken years, and some companies obviously still struggle with that. How do we get to become data-driven? And that is kind of a catchphrase that's out there. Every organization is data-driven. You know, you use data on a day-to-day basis to make more informed decisions, whether in your own personal life or with companies, you're using it. So everyone and every company is data-driven. It's how you define for your respective organization what it means to be data-driven. And that's where I think a lot of companies need to focus on, whether they're small, large, huge Fortune 500 companies, is to have that conversation internally is what does it mean to be data-driven? Because becoming data-driven, you can just say we're data-driven. Yeah, sure. But to really truly take that part of realization is to treat data as a strategic asset as you would any other asset, whether it's a building, your people, your content, ideas, all of that. It really needs to be treated as a strategic asset to be considered a data-driven organization.
Now, I imagine there are many different ways to capture data. I've even seen where some companies put things in spreadsheets. I know that's a bit dated, but spreadsheets can be pretty effective if you know how to use them well.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's other resources out there that people might be able to, or businesses might be able to plug into that are geared towards helping people manage their data.
Sure, yeah, and having spreadsheets is not a bad thing. I mean, every company has spreadsheets, and they're not going to go away, right? Because it allows for flexibility. And in of itself, spreadsheets, whatever you use, is a form of business intelligence, right? It's not an advanced form that's, out in market. There are products that are business intelligence that you can do analytics off of. In regards to the collection of maybe a central source of truth, maybe you have multiple disparate sources of data and you want it to put into one database or one central location. There are kind of three areas. One, you could have a database, right, that pulls it all together. And that's kind of, I'll just use the word clunky, right? It sometimes is not really effective to do analytics or become really a data-driven organization. But there are things called data warehouses, data lakes, and a data lake house. So think data warehouse and compare it to a warehouse that you would have, let's say a Costco or any other warehouse where it has specific rows, columns, everything's labeled, you know exactly where it's at. It's very structured, right? That's a warehouse. And you can pull data in that is structured data. And it's effective, right? It's a great place to do reporting and analytics off of. The next level up is what they call a data lake. And so think visually a lake where it just is like all of this stuff sitting in there. You got your plants in there, you got fish, you got the water, you got all this stuff. So not only does it have the structured data like a data warehouse would, but it also has unstructured data. So unstructured could be in the form of videos, PDFs, textual data, social media, all that kind of stuff, where that's a huge source of data for companies, small companies. How are people perceiving your product or service out on social media? How do you measure that? Well, you got to pull it in first to start to do analytics off of, right? So that's a great place to, and then the hybrid is what they call a data lakehouse, which is a combination of all of those. But however, there are embedded functionalities within a lakehouse that allow companies to do more advanced, not only analytics, but master data management, making sure their data is secure. And so that is kind of like the top level of where people can, or companies can pull data in a central location to do analytics and reporting and all of that.
Well, now that's a perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is data security. Now, I know that is probably a little different based on the type of data that you're collecting. Like if you're collecting social security number, credit cards, and storing that sort of data, it's going to be a lot more regulation, I imagine, applied to that, as opposed to just seeing how many people purchase diapers this month or something like that. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the requirements as far as rules and laws are concerned.
Yeah, I would start off all companies have some shape or form of what they call PII, personal identification information. And that could be clients' names. Though that's yes. Information, regardless if you have a credit card number, that is still information that needs to be secure and safely placed. And as you are collecting more data about that client, then the regulations get more advanced. Yes. So if you're in healthcare, right? So I was in healthcare for the last 21 years, it's PHI. So that's all very sensitive data. Not only do you have patient name, but you have social security number, you have their diagnosis, you have their doctor, you have all this information that is highly, highly regulated by our government. And as you are collecting more PII data, personal information, companies that right now I'm in the financial services industry. So we have a lot of PII information about our clients. And we have to deal with, obviously, regulations and keeping that secure, but we also have to deal with international regulations. So if we have any clients that are from the European Union, there is a regulation out there that is extremely far-reaching. And that's, even though it's in the EU, it touches every single company globally. And they have the ability, they be in the EU, to find companies even in the United States. And it's based off, if you have a client that is based and has an address within the EU. So if you have a client that's in Germany, you are subject to the laws and regulations of that regulation coming out from the EU. So just think of it this way: any data that you're collecting on your client, you really need to approach it on a way to keep it secure as best as you can. And as you get more complex, as you get larger as an entity, you start getting the attention more of regulators, right? And so sometimes, I'm not saying that you can fly underneath the radar and not be secure about your client's data. Everyone should. It's just like how you would want your data treated. Absolutely. As you're doing business with buying a product or whatever, and you're putting stuff online, you want to have that assurance that that company, regardless of its size, is protecting your data in a way that is not going to be stolen or used in an inappropriate manner.
Well, you're bringing up some really interesting points here, especially the part about the international piece of it. And I think when we had talked earlier, you even mentioned like even Colorado and California might have different rules as far as data governance. So not only are you required to apply to these rules if you're doing business in those territories, you're also having to know what those parameters are or the guidelines are for data security in each one of those different states. So growing is exciting,
yeah,
but at the same time, it comes with a lot more responsibility.
Yeah, both responsibility, I think, internally in regards to your process on how you handle that data internally, but also from a technical perspective. And so depending on how your systems or servers are collecting that data, you've got to ensure that it's encrypted, or some aspects where you can't get anybody hacking into your systems per se. So there's two approaches there. One, from an external and even in internal aspects from a technical standpoint that you need to consider in protecting that data. But then also you have to consider, as your company gets larger, who has access to that data, and is it appropriate for them to have access? So going back to my healthcare days, PHI, and I led the team there in regards to not only data governance, but the analytics. My team had carte blanche in regards to access to all data. So we were able to, based on our roles, be able to have access and see all the data. However, when we were producing analytics dashboards or applications, the amount of data that we gave them was limited only to the purpose and their role. And so even if they were a director over an emergency department or ICU, they did not have access to data that was maybe in a different area, because that's not for them. And so we were very, very, very careful in regards to that. And yeah, that's to an exponential level in regards to PHI. And if you get into it under the HIPAA regulation, I don't want to get into that because that's a whole different conversation. Extremely, extremely, from a government standpoint, highly regulated. And that's where PHI comes in. So both internal, from a person who has access, you need to take in consideration, but then also external from your technical aspects, your servers, your computers. Where are you storing that data, and how are you keeping it secure?
Yeah, and even we think about, when it comes to security, we naturally think about hacking, someone hacking into your system or whatnot, but then listening to you talk, it's almost as if you still have to be cognizant of individuals having access to that information, because even without, they don't need to hack because they had access to it.
Absolutely.
Still misuse that data if it's put in the hands of the wrong person. So yeah.
Well, I think, and the other point too is perhaps not any malintent, or however you want to say, on the subject of an individual. Yeah, there are people out there who do use the data inappropriately and sell it and all that kind of stuff. But some people just are not aware of maybe they take a company's laptop home and it has all of this data that's on there that is sitting on their C drive, and all it has to do is somebody take that and steal that laptop, and all of your client data is out there.
Yes.
So, and perhaps that individual didn't mean to, they weren't trying to do anything that was illegal, but that fact in itself, that they took the laptop and did not secure it. So I would classify this more from an education standpoint. There's a lot of education out there on how to keep your company's data secure, not only internally and also from the technical aspect, but so that your employees are not doing anything inappropriately, like carrying laptops around or leaving it in their car, or not locking their screens and walking away from their computer and leaving up client information up there. And so these are just some examples in regards to the thought processes or protocols that you need to have in place to really ensure your data is secure.
Now, I like that you mentioned the laptop, taking it home, that sort of thing. I remember talking to an IT professional, a good friend of mine, and he was saying, don't ever use the public Wi-Fi.
Exactly, yeah.
When you're going to the coffee shop, you just want to hop on because it's easy to do. The one on your phone it's not quite efficient, to get you what you need, but you hop on that public Wi-Fi, and he said,
Yep.
And there's some guy in the corner with two computers who set up a false a mimic of the of the Wi-Fi. You hop on there and they're taking all your data just like that.
Yeah, I think the software that hackers use is called a Pineapple.
Oh, okay.
And so what the Pineapple does is it searches for people who are in that, let's say, coffee shop, right? And it disguises itself as that internet service. So let's say you're at coffee shop A, and then you go there and your computer recognizes coffee shop A, and sometimes it'll automatically connect, but it's actually the Pineapple. And so you connect to it. And so that hacker sitting right there, and you're just doing your thing, and he or she is just having a ball in regards to all of this information you have pulled up. And so it's relatively easy, right? So obviously they recommend that you never use public Wi-Fi, but okay, realistically, that's probably very difficult sometimes as business owners and entrepreneurs, it's sometimes difficult. But I think just using a sense of caution when using public Wi-Fi and what you're looking at.
Yeah, that is really, really excellent information. Thank you very much. Yeah, and one of the things I was going to ask about was, where do you see the world heading? And I guess we could tell by this conversation that this is not something we're going away from. This is something we're moving more to as more things become electronic. And I mean, even the monetary systems are becoming, well, they've been electronic for a while if you
Sure.
really think about it. But even more so now with the government, our government even talking about engaging in cryptocurrency and things like that. So there's just going to be so much more data just flying around everywhere and trying to keep up with all the storage and things like that. I don't know, what do you see for the future? Is that kind of an alignment where pretty much everything we do will eventually seem like it's going to be that way online as some kind of data driven something?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, obviously that train is just going down that track, has 100 miles an hour, right? And exponentially, it's just growing because storage is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And so what we're seeing from a AI perspective, artificial intelligence, the chat GPT and the generative AI, the reason why it just all of a sudden came on to the market, it's been in development since the 50s and 60s, right? The
Yeah.
reason why it's now getting to a place is because the storage is so cheap and it's so available that they're able to use what they call LLMs, large language models, which are the backbone of a lot of this chat GPT and either some of this generative AI models, that they're able to store all of this data. And all of this data that large language models have is basically a dump of the internet, right? And that's what ChatGPT is sitting on top of. It's not 100% accurate. If you've ever used it, it's very powerful, but it's not 100% accurate. So use it with a grain of salt. So that from that aspect, we're going to see, I believe we're going to see continued growth with AI. It's just going to explode. And so it's not going away. So yeah, there's a lot of fear, but there's also a lot of hope in regards to what we're seeing in the future, not only from an AI perspective, but machine learning, predictive analytics, all of this stuff from a company perspective. It would behoove, and I would highly recommend that you take that into consideration. If you can find a way to monetize generative AI from a chat GPT perspective, please do, because that's where a lot of stuff is going, right? So the company I'm with right now, we just monetized it and we're able to initially sell a little piece of this to our clients. So there's a huge opportunity for not only for small businesses, but big companies. And so highly recommend evaluating. Obviously, I would think initially get your own house in order in regards to understanding what you have from a data perspective, because trying to jump to generative AI model and trying to monetize it, if your data isn't correct, that's not going to be correct. And so that's what AI looks at, is what you have in your own data warehouse or whatever it is. So it really needs to be small steps in regards to ensuring what you have currently is accurate before you can make that leap. So I think to answer your question, I think we're just going to see this continued explosion use of not only electronics, but data. It's just not going away.
Yes. So it's basically get on board or get left behind and possibly get fined, I imagine, because we haven't talked about fines, but I imagine even if there's differences across state, across international, across the waters or whatever, that there are penalties maybe for not complying to the standards for data protection and things like that. And I don't know how big they are, but I know I've seen some apology letters come across from some firms that have been hacked or something like that. And I know they're sometimes depending on the extent of the hack, sometimes they're having to pay monetary damage. So yeah.
It depends. It really does in regards to the nature of whether you want to call it a breach or a hack or whatever it may be. If your company discovers that your data has been breached and you notify, the regulators are a little bit more forgiving. And some require that you notify. If you don't notify, then you're really in a world of hurt, right? So let's go back to the GDPR. I'm just going to give an example. This is an extreme example, so don't get too scared about it, but it's possible. They can fine a entity up to $20 million in euros, right? And so if there is some way that the data is not used, it's used in a way that they find that you have broken that regulation, they can go as far as $20 million. In addition to that, the person, what they call a data subject within the regulation, can also sue that company for damages. So not only on top of the 20 million, or the 20 million, they can on top of, you know, their personal damages. And so that's a GDPR. HIPAA from a PHI perspective, there's potential jail time if it's found that you are, you know, doing intent with intent. And then obviously the fines, you know, I think at minimum can be 50,000 and go up from there. So those are extreme cases, Eric, and they have happened. But it's in a way that I think helps companies understand on how serious data protection is. Because, you know, I always look back on yourself. How do you want your data to be used, right?
Right.
So think about your clients and how should I protect their data? You want to keep their business. So I think it's a wise investment to ensure that their data is protected.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Nick, for coming on and sharing this with us today. I mean, I feel wiser having had this talk. So I want the audience to be able to reach out to you, to be able to ask questions, to be able to follow you on social media. So maybe if you could share with the people how they can either get in touch with you if you're open to that, or how they may follow you. I know you have a YouTube channel as well. I believe that they may be able to follow. So yeah, if you could just let the audience know about that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably a primary source of getting a hold of me. And then obviously my name's Nick Malaconi. So I'm out there. Second, my email address, I think that's probably a good way. And I'm nmalaconi@yahoo.com. And my last name is Moliconi. And then I just started a YouTube channel, and I created what I'm calling Data Shorts. That's the name of the videos. And they're 2-minute, just educational videos around data governance and analytics and data in general. So I've got 3 videos out there right now, and it's all under my name. So those are the 3 best ways to get a hold of me.
Outstanding. Is there anything else that I might have missed that you feel like the audience should know, or do they just need to go follow your channel and you'll pick it up?
Well, I think I just want to reiterate how exciting. I am very passionate about data and
Yes.
what data, because data is power, right? It allows companies and individuals to make more informed decisions if the data is correct. And so I think it allows a company to flourish, innovate, and remain competitive. So this is just a wonderful world that we're going into, and the realization on how important data is as a strategic asset.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, Nick, for taking the time to come on and share with us. I appreciate
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Until next time, this is Galton University.